Here's to whiskey kisses, the peachy taste of sin.
Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. And for the first time, we have a split-screen guest in the studio. Welcome, Patrick Dunlop. It is an absolute honour to have you back, where in many ways your whiskey journey sort of kind of began here. So it's good to have you back at the Strath, for,
Absolutely.
If only for a fleeting moment.
Very good to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam. Appreciate that. It's wonderful to be back in my old stomping grounds.
So, I should mention first off, this is our first time doing a split screen, and it's weirdly awkward. So if you see us staring off to one corner of the thing, it's probably because we're looking at each other. Apparently, if we look at the monitor, we actually look like we're looking at each other. Hey, Pat.
Hello.
That's weird.
Yeah.
So, bear with us. We're new at this. But Pat is here today because he is now the Vancouver Island sales rep for TS Global. Which is a fantastic company, which here at the Dram Association we've been lucky enough to work with for a few years now. And they keep bringing out stunning stuff. And Pat's going to introduce us to some new things and a couple of old favourites as well. And Japanese drinks. Mm-hmm. I guess the quintessential one would be sake, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's probably the one that most people would think of when they think about Japanese spirits in general. That's kind of the easy answer for most people, I would say. Yeah. Particularly internationally.
It's been a long time since I did any Japanese language lessons, but I did learn Japanese for about 4 years in late high school. Mm-hmm. And from recollection, I think sake not only is the drink, but is also like the overarching term for alcohol as well.
Correct, yeah. So it is the term for sort of the broad overarching category of all sort of, not even necessarily rice-based drinks, but just different sort of alcoholic drinks, I believe, maybe even including beer and things like that.
I think so. I think technically everything we have here is sake, but only the first one is a sake.
Right, yes. Like a proper, yes, absolutely.
And I've also realized I've been like Americanizing my pronunciation of that word quite dramatically. From recollection, it's actually sake. But
I'm sure it is.
I'll probably pronounce it 17 different ways in this tasting.
As will I. We'll try to outdo each other with mispronunciations of sake. Absolutely.
So let's crack it open and see what we're starting with.
Yeah, for
a couple
sure.
of glasses here.
Yeah.
And through the magic of video, I'm going to pass one all the way over there by going this way.
And
look at that.
Incredible.
We're maintaining the 6 foot distance. That's why we're doing this.
Correct.
Otherwise, we'd have to wear masks, and that would just be awkward.
Yeah, I don't think you'd be able to enjoy our lovely faces, hear anything that we're saying. Everything about this would be more awkward than it already is, and hopefully it's not.
Pretty hard trying to drink sake through a mask.
Very much so, yeah. Maybe some interesting curly straw sort of action. So yes, sake, the first thing that we have up for you today, Adam, and members of the Dram Association and other fine folks watching at home, is the Lachamte, and that's also possibly a mispronunciation, sparkling sake. So this is a really interesting category of sort of an emerging drinks style out of Japan. It's becoming sort of increasingly more popular and getting more of a foothold over here in the West. Just sort of a really brief overview of sort of what is sake in general, just for anybody who might not have the fullest understanding. Sake in the traditional sense that we understand it here in the West. Basically, it is distilled from 3 main ingredients. You have rice, usually a short grain rice, almost exclusively always a short grain rice. Then you're going to have something called koji, which is a rice mold. It's a naturally occurring mold that you find on certain types of rice that's actually cultivated and utilized in the production of sake.
Interesting. Is that similar to the botrytis thing? Does it make it sweeter, do you know?
I honestly don't know what it imparts. Well, so essentially what it's used for is to convert all the starches into sugar. So it acts the same way that malting barley acts on a whiskey, a beer, anything like that.
That's clever.
In terms of finished sort of sweetness or funkiness or anything like that, I can't imagine it wouldn't have an effect of some kind. My understanding is that they really do sort of like to cultivate certain maybe strains of koji and use them at certain times for certain...
So it's almost like a natural dry brewing.
Essentially,
That's kind of cool.
In a way, yeah. And then they will complete the process in much the same way. So once you've got, so you're taking your short grain rice, you're polishing it down to some degree or another. That's another sort of key component of sake making, and something that determines your sort of finished quality and purity. They have polishing levels ranging anywhere from like 75, 85% of the rice might be left, all the way down to maybe only 40% or less of the rice grain is left. And so what you're doing is taking off outside sort of impurities and things like that.
Any trace of the husk, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And then the finer the polish, the better, cleaner, more sort of desirable result you're going to get in sake brewing. But also, obviously, the less sort of yield you're getting on your rice, and the sort of just greater in the cost and the time involved as well. So when you are buying sake of any kind, the polish level will give you an indication of some level of quality, but also, and it's often written on the bottle as it is in...
oh, cool. I was actually just about to ask that if that is sort of a generally known thing.
Yeah, it is increasingly. I think most sake producers recognize that they're sort of more educated, nerdier sort of drinkers globally. So they're putting things like the acidity level, the polish level, things of that nature, just to sort of give everybody a little bit of a better picture of quality. But the price is going to sort of go up naturally on things like that because of less yield and everything else.
Of course.
And then essentially, so polish, the rice is then steamed. The rice is then inoculated with the koji, given time to sort of convert and malt, if you will. And then it is basically just brewed like you would brew a beer at that point, or make a wine. You're just adding yeast at that point, and the yeast will definitely impart different flavors. They'll use different yeast strains and things like that. Water, let it brew very much like it is a beer.
So I misunderstood it for some reason. I had it in my head that the koji actually not only converted the starch to sugars, but also like started fermenting them. But it's just a conversion thing. So it's more like malting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
So that is probably like a common misconception. But so that's why I feel like maybe you're going to get more of a final finished sort of tasting experience out of it based on the yeast more so than the koji. But I can't imagine the koji wouldn't add anything to the party beyond just conversion. It's hard to say for sure though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, different malting techniques do end up changing the flavor in whiskey, so that could make a difference. Definitely. So what kind of polish and everything are we looking at this one? I get some stats now. Yeah,
for sure. So to get a little stats nerdy, this has a 65% polish. And so when you see a polish number like that, 65% means you have 65% of the original rice grain left.
Cool.
So the lower the number, the sort of less of the rice is left, and so the more polishing is done. It's a little bit counterintuitive that way. So 65% is right in the sort of more sort of it's not extremely high quality in terms of polishing. This isn't if this was brewed for some really elegant sipping, it sort of wouldn't have that refinement to it. But it is right, it's beyond the threshold of your real sort of bottom shelf.
Because I think that's another thing. A lot of people that don't drink sake regularly don't realize that a lot of the stuff that you find at standard menu items in a Japanese restaurant, for example, or the stuff, the mass produced stuff you find in liquor stores, that's like the cheapest of the cheap. And sake goes like really, really pricey.
Yes.
Like when you say the premium stuff is however level of polish, you're talking about the stuff that most people have never tried because it's quite expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are things available on the market here, even from our own portfolio, that are sort of in the 100 plus sort of dollar range or up and around that sort of level. They're fantastic, they're phenomenal, but they're definitely something for a bit of an occasion and for somebody to sort of like level themselves up to a little bit.
Nice.
Whereas this is quite an approachable, affordable sort of alternative, but it's much higher quality than something you're going to find, on the bottom shelf of your local government liquor store or something like that.
So definitely special, but not like outlandish. It's Friday night date night special, not graduation present special.
Very much so, yeah, for sure.
Nice.
And the sparkling element to it is just the thing that really does sort of set it apart. The yeast that they're using to get the sparkle on it is actually imparting a huge amount, as you'll see, Adam, of sort of fresh fruity flavors, nice sort of dry, beastie character to go along with that. And it's some sparkling sakes can be quite intensely dry and a little bit off-putting. This has none of that. It has big, fruity sort of peach notes, things like that. So it's quite lovely.
So it's sounding like a perfect alternative to like a really almost like a sparkling Sauvignon Blanc, if that exists.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really great way to put it. Yeah, it does hit some of those gooseberry, peachy, sort of unctuous, oily notes with that lightness and that sparkle from the yeast.
I don't. Do you know the origin of sparkling sake? Is it quite an old thing, or is it relatively recent?
That is honestly something that I'm not...
I couldn't figure it out either.
Yeah.
I feel like I've only just recently started seeing them, but that might be because I've only recently started looking, right?
I feel the same way. And I think as far as availability here in the West, very much so. Like, it seems to be really something that we're on the forefront of. Yeah. As far as traditionally in Japan, I really am not entirely well-versed on sort of how far back it goes.
Yeah. So I was thinking, if it is a new thing, which it may not be, it may be very, very traditional. Generally, new things in the market these days are trying to pull from a different sector. So it's like sparkling sake. Is that trying to draw people in who usually drink beer? Maybe, because I mean, especially in Japan, beers are pretty sparkling. I've never had a flat Japanese beer.
No.
Or is it trying to pull in sort of the champagne market? I mean, I guess different sakes would do different things, but.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really interesting thing just to bring up in general. I think it can sort of appeal to either of those sectors without sort of being too sort of flat about the whole thing. I mean, it has some elements. It has that yeastiness and some things that would appear to appeal to beer drinkers. But I feel like the lightness and the fruitiness of it might skew a little bit more towards somebody who enjoys a Prosecco, a Sauvignon Blanc, something like that. But then it is really just its own thing off to the side of all of those things. And it really just sort of, it just brings a new series of sensations and flavors to the party. So.
Because one of the interesting things about sake as well, it's often translated as rice wine, when really it's rice beer, because wine has to be made of fruit. And last time I checked, rice is not a fruit.
No. Yeah. And with the sort of pseudo malting process going on with the koji and everything else. And I mean, most Japanese sake producers, I mean, they call themselves breweries, or at least that's the translation for it. So yeah, it is generally speaking a little bit more akin to that. And that does sort of go back to your point that maybe they are trying to appeal to, a fruitier beer drinker. It's certainly something that would go well on the same days with the same sort of meals and things that a nice light or even a fruit beer might go with. So yeah, I can definitely take your point when it comes to that for sure. That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, let's see how it tastes.
Absolutely.
I'm very much looking forward to this. This is magic. My glass goes off screen. It's going to come back full. Well, not full.
Absolutely to the brim.
I guess I usually see sake being traditionally served in like a stoneware cup. I am assuming sparkling sake wouldn't be, or
that's that's a good question. In all honesty, I haven't seen maybe the traditional official sort of serving style for it. Certainly something that would actually honestly drink really nicely out of a flute. You do get some real visual sort of bubble. It is, I understand, sort of made with a continuous fermentation process.
The one thing I'm noticing, I'll see if we can get it on the camera, is if you look at the head, it sticks to the glass like a beer does, not like a champagne.
True.
Which is, I think, exciting because I prefer beer over champagne.
Fair,
but,
yeah.
Oh, it smells so interesting. It's like lychee bread.
Yeah, very bready, very much yeasty, funky. But yeah, the lychee
honey as well.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, it's like singed honey and lychee mixed together into a spread on like a fresh sourdough.
That sounds delicious.
I know, right?
Wow.
And it smells. I've only ever had one sparkling sake before, I've got to say. and this smells completely different to the one I've had. And to be fair, the one I've had, I can't remember the name of it. It comes in those little blue bottles. It's basically soda. It tastes like Sprite.
Right.
It's nice, but it's Sprite.
Yeah, for sure. It's got that big sugar candy.
Yeah. This is definitely... Oh my.
So right away, just big, unctuous sort of stone fruit and things like that up front. More of that lychee, more sort of peachy notes. The funk sort of really comes through like that just sort of indescribable sort of rice, fermented rice kind of funkiness. It's all quite well balanced.
I have to admit, this is a whole lot better than I was expecting. Wow. I can definitely see why Megan brought this in. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
It's really good.
Yeah. It's
and honestly, we were just having the conversation about whether this is a replacement for wine or beer. This, as soon as I tasted it, this is exactly what I've always wanted mead to be. This is always how I imagine mead should be. Yeah. And never is.
No.
I'm not actually, I don't mean any disrespect to local mead places, but I've not had a good Canadian mead. And for how I prefer mead. I mean, obviously some people like it, otherwise they wouldn't be in business anymore. But
that's fair, yeah. But you really do get that because you get that big burst of sweetness, that sort of fermented sweetness. But that underlying funk, that everything that the yeast brings to the party is just really, really sets it apart from really any other. And that's why it's hard for me to sort of classify or to sort of even really articulate. It's just...
I think the closest thing you could get to try and actually recreate this would be like a mead Sauternes champagne-based cocktail.
That's a lot of words. But I mean, your brain is just working a lot faster than mine putting all those things together. But that's all happening for sure. Sauternes is a great sort of descriptor. I mean, it has that real, just sweet funk.
I can't stop drinking it.
No,
I should because we're about to drink more. But
right, yeah.
I can't.
It's really, pretty dangerously good. So I brought this into the Strath to pour for Megan Carson, the manager, about a month ago now, or 3 weeks ago or so. And a bunch of the other staff members happened to be on hand, and I just sort of gathered everybody around and poured a little bit of this for everybody, and it just blew everyone's minds. Like,
hey guys, try this.
Yeah. So, I stand very proudly behind this product. It's really cool, and it's a hard one to do a preamble on, but once you taste it, you really do sort of understand what's happening here, and it's pretty crazy, pretty cool stuff.
So I know for most people who are watching this on YouTube probably weren't there live in person, but as this goes out onto the internet, a couple of days before this got released, we actually did a in-person tasting in the Maple Room, which is the first tasting we've done in person since the COVID-19 outbreak. And in now time, because the whole time machine of we're not live, that's tomorrow, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing the reactions of people trying this tomorrow now.
Yeah, me as well.
Because there's no way to fully describe what this is if you haven't tried it.
Yeah. It's just sort of, indescribable, but just really crazy delicious. With the greatest fruit beer, Sauternes cocktail, sparkling wine, Sauvignon Blanc, sake hybrid thing you've ever had.
It's a huge testament to the variety of flavors you can get in sake.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I guess that's why the things like the WSET sake certifications exist, because it is like, there is a sake certificate, but there's not a whiskey certificate. And that's kind of interesting in itself.
That says something, for sure, yeah. And I've got to say, as somebody who's just sort of recently taken on this new position, and I'm with this company that has so many of these really unique sort of Japanese spirits and quite a few sake, I mean, I'm just honestly at the absolute precipice of beginning to sort of fall head over heels in love with this as a category, and also just as something to get really nerdy and really excited about. It's just really new, really different. Just something to get really pretty fired up about, I would say.
Wow. I might need to try more sakes.
Maybe you do.
I think we should. If this is anything to go by, maybe later in the year when summer's well and truly over and we're into winter time, maybe we should do a full sake tasting as well.
I would be totally game for that, for sure. Yeah, let's...
Cool. Maybe we can team up with one of the local sushi places and get them to do a tasting with sushi as well. Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be nice.
I think we've got something there.
We're on it.
We're
Okay.
on it.
Coming in a few months' time.
Right. Stay tuned.
Well, I finished mine.
I'm gonna do the same because it is really good, and it is best drunk like fresh, cold. It is a smaller format bottle. It's a 280 ml.
Cool.
It is bottled at 8%.
Really?
Yes,
That's 8%.
Yep.
It tastes like 3.
Be careful.
Wow.
Yeah. I will just I'll talk just briefly about the sake brewery that put this out as well. So this was founded by a gentleman by the name of Suzuki in 1689. So this is one of the sort of older sake houses in Japan. It's been in the Suzuki family for 19 generations, and it's got the nickname, and some of the sakes, more traditional sakes, are bottled under the brand name Hideyoshi. There was, I believe in the 18th century, a warlord in the area who organized probably the first ever sake competition in that part of Japan, or maybe in Japan in general.
That's certainly what he's not what he's most known for.
No, but exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so he sort of went through them all, and he declared this sake brewery to be the best, and he shouted out Hideyoshi. And if you break that down, Hide is sort of excellent or outstanding. Yoshi is good, virtuous, respectable. So that was like his little stamp of approval, and now they do like to use that as a brand name for the sake. It's great, yeah.
Despite this one having a weird French name, which maybe they're trying to hit the champagne market with that.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, the name, the branding, and the name is it stands out for sure, but it can maybe muddle things a little bit for some people. But yeah.
It's as crazy and exciting as the flavor, though. So I'll say that about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We might need to restock as quickly as possible because I'm definitely buying a bottle to take home because my girlfriend Kristen's going to love this.
Yeah.
But for those of you who are looking to buy it online, within a week of this video going live on the YouTubes, it will be 10% off. So it's normally $18.43, and you can get it for $16.59. $16.59.
Yeah. That's
a pretty good price for actually how many drinks you get out of this. Because remember, this is not a bottle of beer that you swig down. This is one bottle. Treat it like a full bottle of wine in a sense. Like it's enough flavor and enough volume that one bottle of this will split between two people across a meal.
Easily.
I think quite nicely.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, and just save it for a sushi night. Save it for a night when you're having a little bit of Japanese fare. But it could pair with.
Honestly, save it for a tapas night.
Yeah,
like,
tapas night.
Like this would go really well with chorizo.
Yes, it really would. Yeah, it would cut through the fattiness and anything spicy. You could get into some really fun food pairings with this for sure, of all kinds.
All right, so available right now at strathliquor.com. We're moving on now to something that is a little bit more familiar to me, whiskey.
And me as well.
All right. And actually, that should be mentioned. I mentioned earlier on in the video that Pat is an alumni of sorts of the Strath Ale and Spirit Merchants here. Pat actually had my position before I did. So, thank you for
passing along the
reins.
For sure, yeah. So Adam at one time, for those of you who aren't familiar with me, Adam was my sidekick at one point.
I was.
I worked here for a number of years, a handful of years ago now, and Adam took the reins from me and has taken this whole Strath whiskey thing to heights beyond anything I could have imagined. So kudos.
Hey, you set the scene. I just played the video.
Perfect. Lovely.
It really is fantastic to have you back here, and it's been a long time coming that we have presented a whiskey together. So let's see what we got.
All right, so onto whiskey, something that's near and dear to both our hearts. So this is Yamazakura. This is a pure malt whiskey, and we'll do the big unboxing reveal here. This is a fresh, unopened, beautiful, sort of shimmering, almost three-dimensional blue label.
And I have to admit, the label, when I first saw it, I thought was hideous. And I've grown to quite like it. I think of it as like a weird Pac-Man thing. Like
in terms of the...
the grid, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, from certain angles and from certain sides, there's something a little bit sort of off kilter about it for sure. But yeah, no, I mean it's the product inside is something I can definitely speak to.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and it is lovely indeed. So let's open this up and pour a wee dram.
fantastic. Got to get that pop.
Mm-hmm.
I promised everyone that would be my next T-shirt design: pop and glug.
That's good. Sold. I'll buy one of those. Oh, slightly difficult pull tab here.
We could make a montage of difficulty opening bottles on these videos.
Yeah.
it's an ongoing theme. Nice.
Wonderful. No sound effects there. That's all pure.
Oh yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
The magical whiskey appear.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it's full now.
Amazing.
So for the folks at home, you may recognize this, depending how long you've been in the Dram Association. About a year and a half, possibly 2 years ago, when this whiskey first arrived in BC. Within a couple of weeks of it hitting our shelves, I think we were one of the first liquor stores to pick it up back in the day. We actually put this to our members as an in-store sampling. So some of you might remember this. It was called a Sweet Peat Treat for a Spacewalk.
The best name. They should really consider rebranding.
Because at the time, apparently most people disagreed with me, but some people agreed with me. I did find it lightly peated on the back end, but you almost had to go into a weird Zen-like state of solitude to actually be able to find it. So that's where the spacewalk kind of comes in.
Nice. Yeah. I will say from my own experience and from, sort of various tasting notes I've unearthed here and there, peat seems to be, it's there. It is often referred to as a sort of whispering, lingering in the background, sort of, dancing around the outskirts of the various sort of tasting notes that you get out of this. But,
having had some recently, this is about as peated as a Ben Romack, in the sense that I think their ppm is like 5 or something. It's really, really low,
right.
And it's certainly not the first thing you find, but it is there if you go looking.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. So a little bit about Yamazakura. So this particular release, they call this a pure malt, and what that means is this is essentially a blended malt. What used to be called vatted malt. So single malt whiskeys all brought together under one roof.
See, this is where I try and get Pat on board with our movement, guys at home. I think we should call it a multi-malt.
Multi-malt, I like that quite a bit. Yeah, for sure. Something about blended malt that throws a lot of, especially casual whiskey people, completely for a loop. They're like, is it a blend? It's too much.
I mean, I personally like blended malt because I have a reverence and a respect for the blending process. But for people who equate the word blend with, Dewar's or Famous Grouse or, the lower end blended whiskies, which are the nothing against them, but it's a very different thing to a blended malt. It does get kind of confusing.
Yeah, very much so. So, yeah, a blend of single malts, and in the case of this Yamazakura, these are what they call world malts. So this isn't all necessarily Japanese. It's not all necessarily from this particular distillery. This is them sort of showcasing the art of blending, the art of putting together a Japanese whiskey style. And as we sort of get into it, there are like a few reasons for them doing it the way they're doing it. The biggest of which is essentially they've recently sort of moved all their operations from their previous base in Tohoku. Pardon my Japanese pronunciation. Tohoku. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Something like that.
And now they have opened a brand new distillery as of 2016 in Koriyama, so a different part of Japan. And the distillery that they've sort of opened at that time was called Asaka, and that's a very new venture for this company. And in the meantime, they have been around since 1765. The actual parent company, or the company itself, is called Sasanokawa, and it is the oldest sake brewery in Japan's northeastern Tohoku region, with a sort of a whiskey history that dates back into the 40s, so 1946, just post-war. They did launch a few whiskey brands. One was called Cherry, the other was Yamazakura. So they've got whiskey experience for years. but not a huge amount of time under the belt with sort of the way they've shifted operations since about 2016. So it's the beginning of a new sort of venture for them and a new sort of dawn for them on the international market. But in the meantime, they're showcasing really phenomenally blended malt whiskey. They also have just a straight ahead blend as well, which I'm told has a little bit of Canadian grain whiskey in it. So truly sort of like a global thing. And
probably Alberta Premium.
Probably, yeah, most likely, yeah.
That's a hot topic right
the
now.
Famous or infamous Alberta Premium, loved by Panama-hatted gentlemen worldwide.
Gentleman's pushing it.
Anyway, so certainly a brand to keep an eye on going forward. One of the other sort of interesting things about the Asahara Distillery, or actually more so the Sasanokawa parent company, is they have some serious involvement with the Ichiro's Malt brand. They were the ones who came to the rescue of the now defunct Hanyu distillery that went under in about 2004. They came in, put up the capital to sort of swoop up all the casks of Hanyu that were remaining, or at least a good portion of them, and sort of just keep those on the market. And they were able to help release the Ichiro's Malt, quite rightfully famous Japanese.
Yeah, if that's ringing any bells for anyone at home, it's, remember the series with the playing cards and the upwards of 6 to 7 digit price tags? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
So they were able to convert a potential loss and a potential disaster into a little bit of marketing wizardry and genius, and or at least get the liquid out of harm's way and let it sort of do its thing. So
it sounds like they're really quite an integral part of the Japanese whiskey community, which is nice. And really, from what you said, they're pretty much a bit of a unicorn in the sense that they are a craft distillery with decades of experience, which most of the time craft distilleries sort of outgrow that and become conglomerates, or become a little bit soulless. I mean, I'm not saying that Suntory is necessarily soulless, but I haven't seen it sold them well.
Right.
It's nice to see a distillery that has been around for quite a while and that is still retaining its original sort of craft ethos in a sense.
Very much so, yeah, absolutely, and really exhibiting an extremely deft hand when it comes to putting something like this pure malt together. Just a real sort of reverence for whiskey as a broad category across Japan and Asia and sort of globally, and they put together something really interesting here.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I think we should probably talk about the elephant in the room of, is it really Japanese whiskey if it's not all Japanese? And I think I'm pretty sure you're on the same side as me in this. And my argument to folks at home who are going, no, it's not. It's not Japanese whiskey at all. My argument is, if a Hollywood movie stars a British actor, is it still a Hollywood movie? Yes. It's still curated, directed, everything else about it is Hollywood. Just because the actor's not from Hollywood doesn't make it not Hollywood. And it's the same for me for Japanese whiskey. It's the art of blending, it's the idea and the curation of what the whiskey is, what the whiskey's going to be, that matters more, much more, I would say, than where the whiskey's actually from. I prefer my Japanese whiskey to have at least some Japanese spirit in it, because I think that's nice. And I mean, I love Japanese single malts, don't get me wrong. I love actual Japanese, fully Japanese whiskeys. But I think just because part of a Japanese whiskey is not necessarily made in Japan doesn't make it any less Japanese. And Japan's not the only country that does this. There's a whole lot of distilleries that are cheekily not actually where they say they're from as well. Like Canadian Club, 100% rye.
Yeah.
Canadian Club, famous Hiram Walker thing from, the Ontario, what was it, Walkersville or whatever it's called, the little town where everything is now.
Right.
Is actually made in Alberta by Alberta distillers.
Yeah.
It's not actually Ontario, and Ontario and Alberta are very far apart. But the same thing goes with quite a few American whiskies that actually use Canadian whiskey in them as well. An awful lot of the Sazerac brand stuff, I don't think Sazerac itself, but the lower end stuff, uses grain whiskey, rye whiskey from Quebec. It's done all over the world. It's just that some people have latched onto this idea that the Japanese are trying to fool us somehow, and it's just not true.
Yeah, you have other famous examples. I think Whistle Pig, which is another really good example.
It's Alberta Premium.
At the end of the day, everything is Alberta Premium.
Yes.
If you take one lesson away from that, it's that. Just kidding.
And even a lot of Japanese whiskies, which a lot of people believe to be 100% Japanese, because they've been on the market for a long time, aren't. Like Nika from the Barrel is mostly Ben Nevis.
Yeah.
Like,
doesn't make it any less delightful.
It's still fantastic, as is this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still capturing that character and that style, that freshness, that lightness, that fruitiness, that little underlying of peat and everything that you're going to find in any Japanese single malt that's well composed or blend that's well composed. They're capturing a flavor profile that they can hang their hat on, and at the end of the day, they're producing fantastic whiskey.
Absolutely. And in reality, what Japanese whiskey is and always has been is the art of using age-old perfected techniques from Scotland, but then tailoring it to a Japanese palate and a Japanese audience.
Yeah.
And that has always been that way, apart from Yoichi, apart from Taketsuru, who just bullheadedly wanted to make everything as Scottish as possible at any given time.
Yeah.
But these days, even Nika will make Japanese whiskey that is actually tailored to more of a Japanese palate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, let's dive right into this.
Quite malty.
Malty.
I don't know if it might be from having something a little sweeter before with that sake, but yeah, I know previously I got much more fruit on this, but today I'm definitely getting a lot more of the bready malty notes.
Yeah, a little dry, spicy, some oak influence as well. I mean, it's a freshly opened bottle as well, which always contributes a little bit.
Yeah, we were talking for a while before we tasted it, but not long enough for it to oxidize fully.
No, yeah, not at all. I did pull, and I'm just gonna whole hog sort of steal some Dram Association tasting notes that you put together. So on the nose, originally, the last time you tasted this, just to refresh your memory, Adam,
yeah, thanks.
You found things like apple and cherry crumble drizzled with caramel sauce and creme anglaise, also banoffee pie, banana toffee pie.
Very
for
nice.
those who don't know. And on the palate, you found dried cherries, thick, creamy vanilla and macadamia nuts, sliced pears, raisin bread, and custard creams, and then a bit of soft peat sort of swirling around in the background. And I would say there is for sure, there's a sherry cask influence in this. There is some peatiness to it, and sort of undeniably, it's lingering around the edges and in the background. Do you feel like a lot of those still hold true, or are you getting a new...
Yeah. No, I would say that's definitely the same sort of overall gamut that I'm getting. I'm getting more of the crumble and less of the fruit. But, I mean, that being said, I'm still getting apples. I'm still getting orchard fruits. Definitely getting caramel.
Yeah, the big vanilla bit. I always get on any sort of a Japanese whiskey, it's something they seem to aspire to, whether it's a single malt or otherwise, whether it's 100% Japanese or otherwise. I always get an ice creamy, just this. It's like those little ice cream ball things, the little nub things. You know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea.
Oh, that they sort of melt on your tongue. Kids like them, I think.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Ice cream nubs.
Yeah, this cool creaminess that just kind of melts across your tongue, and I just find that fairly uniformly across a wide swath of Japanese whiskeys. And I get that here for sure.
Yeah, vanilla ice cream is often a calling card for me as well for Japanese whiskey. I always wondered if it's because vanilla ice cream isn't actually that common in Japan. I can't remember seeing much ice cream there.
I remember I've been to Tokyo once, and I was visiting a friend for his wedding. He's an ice cream fiend, and he knew where to get ice cream. So, I mean, it's
well, there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean,
I had a McFlurry in Japan, but I don't think
nice.
that counts.
Yeah, I had a purple beetroot milkshake at a McDonald's in Japan. That was pretty good.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's about as Japanese as you're going to get.
Pretty dang Japanese, yeah.
I was trying to find one of those pitch black Burger King burgers where they use squid ink in the bread.
Right, yeah. No luck.
No. I think it was discontinued by the time I got there.
Unfortunate.
No, this is quite excellent. And like I said, we got this in when it first arrived into BC, and it's one that I've kept on the shelf since then. It's not going anywhere as far as I'm aware. So please tell me it's not going anywhere.
Nope. It's here to stay for the foreseeable future for sure. Yeah.
Excellent.
A good staple. Yeah. I mean, I see it on bars around town. I have it at the bar that I work at the Union Club on my
Excellent.
On my nighttime hours. Yeah. I mean, it's a really lovely little malt bottled at 48%. For those of you who are interested in those,
which I
things.
feel like is rare for Japanese whiskies. I'm wondering if maybe this is something they're doing because they know this bottle is going for export. Because I feel like most domestic Japanese whiskies stick quite religiously to 40.
Yeah, 40 or 43 you see a little bit more of, but yeah, they don't venture really much above that sort of level typically. But yeah, you get a lot out of it. It does take water pretty nicely typically as well.
I don't have a water thing with me.
That's okay.
I'll just from here, but that's a good.
Especially freshly opened like this, and with no age statement, so there's a very fair chance that there's some younger whiskey in the mix here.
And that's the thing with age statement as well. I mean, much like the argument with Japanese whiskey, they're not trying to trick you by not putting an age statement on most of the time. Sometimes they are, especially for less expensive whiskies. Often they don't put an age statement on because the age statement would be 4. It's all 4 and 5 year old stuff they're throwing in a bottle together and selling it as quick as possible. But for a whiskey like this, I mean, I don't have the world's best palate for guessing age, but I like to think I'm usually in the right kind of ballpark. This doesn't taste 4. There is a little bit of a youthful kick in a sense, but more of the 8 or 9 year old. But there's definitely much more aged whiskey in here. And my guess is it's probably young Japanese whiskey, probably in that between 6 and 10 kind of age range, mixed with Scottish whiskey in its teens. Yeah, that would be my guess.
Seems like a safe assumption for sure, and just sort of average it out around that. 12 to 14.
Yeah, 12 to 14 kind of an age range average.
With a little older, a little younger kind of.
But of course, the way age statements work is they would only legally allowed to be put the youngest, which wouldn't do this whiskey in particular justice.
No, yeah, exactly.
This for me is using a lack of age statement in the same way that one of my favorite NAS whiskies, the Lafroig Law, uses. Lafroig Law is not young. It's just a good mix of older and younger stuff, and the legal age statement would not do it justice. Yeah, simple as that. Yeah. If this was bottled by a Scottish independent bottler or someone and didn't have any link to Japan at all, I'd still say this is a good blended malt.
Oh, absolutely.
Still pretty much worthy of its price. I mean, Japanese whiskey is always going to have a slightly higher price tag just because the economy in Japan is in a very different place to us. The yen is a very different currency. But if this was Scottish, I would feel pretty good about selling this whiskey for this price if it was a Scotch too. Yeah. And on the price, I should say, it's normally $223.39, and it's currently 10% off of that, which is, if I did the math right, $201.05. So just over $200. Which for a blended malt of this kind of quality is pretty top notch.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, sure.
And at the end of the day, I think the one take home from the first time I tried this whiskey and did those tasting notes, which are online still, that I still stand by, is it has this zen quality to it. It makes you think. It's not an obvious whiskey. It makes you go looking for answers a little bit, both in its story and its flavor profile.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's contemplative and a little bit mysterious and sort of brooding.
There's sherry, but you have to look for it. There's peat, but you have to look for it. There's that almost like the vanilla ice cream thing that you mentioned before is almost Mizunara oak-esque. And there might be some Mizunara oak in here. We have no idea. We don't know the makeup. But if there is, they're making you look for it still.
Yeah, which is part of the fun of any blend or of any sort of blended malt. It's that dichotomy of all these different things being married together and building something new and harmonious, but you can still sort of, see and feel the different component parts
Absolutely.
that are in there. So, yeah, lovely stuff.
Beautiful. Well,
All right.
thank you for the Yamazakura.
Absolutely.
Next up, we have another whiskey. And this is one I'm not as familiar with. I've recently finished a bottle of the Yamazakura. And I've never owned a bottle of this one. Although I have tried it once or twice.
Yeah, so this is the Shinobu, another pure malt. This does have an age statement, 10 years old. Another lovely little Japanese blended malt. So let's dig right into this.
And this one, I can see on the box, we know Mizunara oak.
Very much so, yeah. So it is, it's matured in a blend of ex-bourbon and cherry. We know that. And we know that it has a finish in Mizunara oak. Ooh, it still has plastic on it. It's very novel. I like that. All right.
I'm finding that more and more in whiskies that have shiny labels. Like you can see in the label there, the silvery bits are actually like silver ink.
Right.
And if the silver ink rubs on cardboard, it rubs off.
Oh,
So
okay.
the plastic will actually make the bottle look nice.
Protects it. Yeah. Oh, very good. I did not realize that.
That's the graphic design part of me coming out.
So yeah, noticeably, big, dark, rich color.
Do we know if it's natural color?
We do not. Yeah, I haven't been able to ascertain one way or the other.
We'll find a German shop that's selling it.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah.
The old mid-fart stuff.
Yeah, rely on them to sort of give you the straight goods when it comes to that. A screw cap as well, which is kind of fun.
But Mizunara oak is very porous and does give an awful lot of colour, so it would make sense for a 10-year-old to have that kind of a colour on it.
Particularly with a good amount of sherry butts in the mix as well.
Yeah, that's double colouring it, really.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Sure.
Thank you. Oh yeah, that's something.
Yeah. This is a big one for me. I love this one quite a bit. This is probably one of my top favorites in our portfolio at the moment.
Rum and raisin ice cream on the nose is where I'm straight looking for.
Yeah, which is a huge old favorite of mine when I was more of an ice cream person. Some tobacco-y, like a little pipe tobacco.
Yeah, was it you that had that cherry tobacco that I think you brought back?
That was me. Yeah.
Yeah,
a little bit of that for sure.
That's a nice nose. There's a nice strong nose as well. What's the ABV on this?
So this is only bottled at 43.
Really?
But it really does, yeah.
It's a very strong, flavorful aroma.
It jumps out like it's substantially higher than that.
Wow.
So probably the first thing to get into, since we've already covered a lot about sort of pure malt or blended malt and how that sort of concept works, the Mizunara oak is really one of the things that sets this apart more than absolutely almost anything. You're imparting an awful lot of really cool flavors when you're using Mizunara oak. It's a very expensive, rare type of Japanese oak. You're seeing it pop up a little bit more here and there. Even Chivas did originally what was a travel retail sort of Mizunara oak.
And I know you had that at the Union Club bar. I had many grams of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it's lovely. I mean, it brings something brand new and wholly sort of Japanese to the party. You're going to get things in a well taken care of Mizunara oak cask. In the finished whiskey, things like fresh fruit, cocoa nibs, coconut, vanilla, floral honey, blossoms, subtle hints of Japanese incense, Kiara, a specific type of Japanese incense, I believe sourced from Vietnam. Something that I saw sort of again and again in Mizunara oak finished whiskeys.
I'm going to have to source some, see what it's about.
Yeah, me as well. Yeah, I feel the same. And then sort of baking spices, nutmeg, mace, clove. And then I feel like all those things, I'm finding a lot of that in here, and I feel like a lot of that is really marrying well with the sherry notes and also the notes from the more traditional sort of bourbon cask as well. So that's just imparting an awful lot of really fun flavor. The Mizunara oak, you see it, a little bit more here and there. It is still quite rare. As I mentioned, it's quite expensive. The cost, and I believe these are all quoted in US dollars, but the typical cost for like an ex-bourbon barrel from a Jim Beam or what have you is going to go for about maybe 200-ish US dollars. If you get into a sherry, but it's going to be more like 700. Could be a little more, could be a little less, could be significantly more. Sherry's a bit of a tricky one. A typical Mizunara oak cask is going to be about 6,000 US dollars. So it's an enormous.
That's a step up.
It's an enormous step up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like 30 barrels.
Yeah. So not something, for a variety of reasons, not something you want to mature in. It is, as Adam mentioned, like quite a porous wood, but also just, quite intensely sort of expensive, quite rare. Some of the other interesting things to note about it is it has a really high natural sort of moisture content. It takes a really long time to dry the wood out to make it usable. It also grows quite crooked often, like this. It takes a really long time for it time for barrel makers to sort of find straight enough sections of Mizunara oak trees.
Which is probably one of the reasons why it's so prone to leaking as well, right?
Yes.
It cracks in the warehouse quite often.
Quite leaky, quite cracky. You're going to lose quite a bit of product. It's quite expensive and inefficient, but produces like fantastic sort of like next level otherworldly results.
That is so Japanese.
Yeah.
It's ridiculously expensive. It's very inefficient. But if you put the time and effort in, it's incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like growing a square watermelon.
Exactly. Requires a lot of dedication and creativity. The reason they sort of started experimenting with Mizunara oak in the first place was just during the sort of World War II period. They were still in some levels of whiskey production in the sort of during and just post World War II. Really difficult to source, obviously, barrels from any of the Allied countries, which is, everybody.
And that would have been Yamazaki back then, wouldn't it? The major one.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading that after Taketsuru left Shinjiro Tori, when he decided to make a more Japanese palatable whiskey, one of the things he experimented with was the Mizunara, which was probably, as you said, out of necessity as well.
Yeah, exactly. We can't get American oak for obvious reasons, or anything from the UK or Scotland right now, or most of mainland Europe. Let's take a look at what we have in our backyard, and so out of that necessity, they happened upon their homegrown Mizunara oak, and it's a happy little sort of happenstance or set of circumstances that led to that. Not the war itself, obviously, but
yes,
yeah, that was less.
So one thing that I sometimes do with a whiskey that I know folks at home aren't going to be too familiar with, and for a lot of people who maybe aren't watching from BC, who might not even have access to these, is to try and put it in terms that are a little bit more commonly tasted. So for the Yamazakura, I would say that is most similar in the Scotch realm of things to maybe an older Highland Park, like Highland Park 18, that kind of idea. This one, though, I'm having a little bit more trouble figuring out an equivalent, to be honest. And I think the way that my brain's going really is an interesting one that I wouldn't have thought of, is Bushmills. Like the Bushmills, the 16, that kind of
right.
idea.
Like the single malt Bushmills.
Exactly, yeah. Not the blend, the single malt sherry cask Bushmills.
That's a really good, apt sort of comparison. Because you have that lightness, that sweetness. Some of those, like, I always get like a little a banana sort of note from Bushmills, or from the single malt Bushmills variant, to be sure. Yeah. Because it is. It's hard to equate this with any sort of a Scotch whiskey that really jumps out. I mean, there are elements of this and that. There's a little bit of maybe Aberlour. There's a little bit of maybe Hazelburny, Glenfarclassy sort of creamy things going on here.
The spiciness and the slight almost saltiness is kind of Old Pulteney-esque, but
yeah, very much so. So it's and again, this is a blended malt. So this isn't beyond the Japanese oak itself. We don't have concrete data about sort of where this is sourced from. So this could be sort of pan pan-Scottish, pan-Japanese, maybe there is some Irish whiskey.
It could be Bushmills and Japanese whiskey blended together.
Maybe
That'd
it's
be
just
nice.
50-50 split between those two things. We can speculate all we want. There's really no telling. So a fun little story with this distillery as well. Essentially, this is another brand new distillery. This was opened in 2018, and not even actually officially really open or running yet. The license has been taken out. All the groundwork has been laid. The branding and sort of these bottlings are obviously on the market and have been now for a little bit. But the distillery is still a little bit under construction, or at least they haven't really been able to produce spirit yet, or nothing ageable. So this was begun by a gentleman by the name of Ken Usami. He began the Niigata Beer Company about 20 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that at this point. So he's sort of one of the earlier craft brewery people in Japan. Really passionate about making sort of Western, North American style sort of craft beer and bringing that into Japan. He is also the very first person in Niigata to apply for a distiller's license as well. So this is he's sort of a pioneer when it comes to beer, and he's a bit of a pioneer when it comes to whiskey. And all the blending that has gone into this is all under his sort of supervision and tutelage. And this is him again showing off his skills and what he brings to the table as a taste maker and a blender.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Yeah.
So another
neat whiskey.
Yeah, very cool. So another just a couple of interesting little accolades about this particular release as well. This is a World Whiskey Awards 2020 category winner for best Japanese blended malt under 12 years old. So
cool.
Yeah, fairly specific.
An actual panel judged competition.
Yeah.
With credible. Yeah.
Nice. So some of the other things on the table have won awards here and there, but I mean that's a very legitimate, very highly touted sort of respected reward. So a nice feather in our cap.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most excellent things about this whiskey, and it's actually surprising I haven't bought myself a bottle yet, and I may still do so quite soon, to be honest, is the price. I don't know how you guys have managed to bring in a 10-year-old Japanese whiskey with an actual age statement with Mizunara oak at this kind of price. Mm-hmm. It's frankly very, very good for its category.
For sure.
Like we've got this on the shelf normally for $150, $122, and with the 10% off that we're giving everyone right now for the next week, or you can always get it if you're a Premier subscriber, is $136.10.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is really, really good.
That is a fantastic price for whiskey this well composed
and Japanese with an age statement.
Yeah.
Like that's one of those. A lot of people get Japanese whiskey as a gift. They don't care what it tastes like themselves. They're getting it for prestige alone as a present for someone as well.
Yeah.
So to have that kind of prestige for that price tag, like none of the big Japanese producers are able to do that anymore.
No.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, it would make a pretty tremendous stocking stuffer. Really beautiful branding and packaging and everything as well, which it can enter into the equation certainly. And I think they've done just a really fantastic job just putting together a flavor for the whole thing in terms of visual presentation. That's pretty eye-catching and pretty lovely. So
absolutely. I mean, I think this would make a fantastic Christmas present if people are shopping early already, or even a fantastic thing to share around the table at Thanksgiving, which is rapidly coming up in a disturbing pace.
In a matter of weeks, or maybe less so by the time this comes out. Yeah,
I mean, this is a really, really cool, interesting whiskey, which is bound to spark conversation at the dinner table. So that would be a good purpose for it.
Something great to cart along for sure. Yeah, lovely stuff.
Nice. Now the next one is one that I am more familiar with. We had it, early this year, maybe January this year, maybe late last year. I can't quite recall when we had this in the Dram Association, but this is one, again, as soon as it hit the warehouse here, we scooped it up because it was interesting sounding and put it in front of our members to see what they thought. And this is an interesting one. I don't know if it's just that people didn't have the available cash flow at the time, but this is probably the biggest discrepancy between the Dram Association score and the amount of bottles we sold. Because for some reason, when it first came out, I loved it. I personally bought a bottle. we sold like maybe 1 or 2, which is absolutely bizarre for how good this whiskey is.
Yeah.
And the people that tasted it rated it good as well. I can't remember the actual score, but I remember it being very, very good for the price. So hopefully getting it in front of more people now is going to refresh people's memory and get people thinking, maybe they made a mistake back then. Maybe they should have got one. Because this is not only a very, very interesting story, but like in a blind tasting, I actually rated this. I did a blind tasting at home with some friends, and I rated this, and Pat's gonna laugh at this, higher than Springbank 15, which is mad.
Yeah, that is crazy.
So yeah, let's throw the Amahagan from Nagahama.
Absolutely, yeah. So fun little play on words, obviously there. Nagahama backwards is Amahagan. This is their, what they call their malt whiskey edition number 1. So this is the first in an ongoing series. They're up to 3 now, although only the first sort of 1 or 2 have reached these shores so far.
And we missed out getting number 2, unfortunately, but I hear it might come back. There might be another shipment of number 2. So
there is
for those of you looking to start the series, pick yourself up a number 1. Number 2 will be back soon.
Absolutely.
You might be able to fetch it elsewhere, and hopefully number 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 will be coming on down the line. We know how people like to collect. With the news that just dropped today that the Macallan edition 6 is the last in the edition series. Wow, there's going to be a lot of people relieved that they don't have to buy another 12 of them, I think.
Their long struggle of buying Macallans is over. That's funny. All right. So we get the satisfying cork pull we didn't get with that screw cap. Lovely.
And actually, do a side-by-side of the 2 lids from that and the Yamazakura. Because it's something that Japanese whiskies have started doing, is actually putting like the mon, the stamp, on the top there.
Yeah, it's actually really...
Which I really enjoy.
Pick that up.
We're both doing that.
Yeah, that's lovely. Really unique sort of, nice wooden grain sort of cork topper as well, too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that as well.
And I really do love the Amahagan packaging. It's so understated and laid back. I love how the still, which I'm sure you'll get into in a second because it's a very specific kind of still that they use, they've got the image of it on the box.
Yes.
And it looks weirdly like Turkish.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is because it is what they call an alembic still, really ancient sort of style of still that you would find in the Middle East. And it's still commonly used in some spirits production, mostly at this point things like Calvados, things like Armagnac, Pisco even, some more sort of rustic, often single distilled spirits. This is twice distilled. They do have 2 of these alembic stills running sort of side by side. But yeah, really tiny little stills, really unique sort of shape, and just really a different way of doing things for sure.
And it's also a kind of still which has had a sudden renaissance in Scotland, which is one of the reasons that this whiskey uses it as well. So the gentleman that started this whiskey, which I'm sure Pat will go into more detail, one of the 2 distilleries that he visited in Scotland to get the inspiration to create this distillery was Strathern, who use an alembic style still.
Cheers.
Oh,
wow. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, it's really... just instantaneously sort of mind-blowing.
It's like this is this is probably my favorite Japanese whiskey that we have on the shelf right now.
Yeah,
and it's not that pricey.
No,
like it's almost exactly the same price as the Shinobu 10.
Yeah,
it's just so well crafted.
There's just so much character. And so I'll get into a little bit of the story behind this distillery and sort of what's going on with this bottling. This isn't, strictly speaking, yet another of the same style of pure malt or blended malt that we saw in the last 2 whiskeys. This does have about 47% or so, they say, of this is actual homegrown actual whiskey from the Nagahama Distillery.
Nice.
So this is the smallest distillery in all of Japan in terms of volume output. Like we mentioned before, they are using like these little alembic stills. These are extremely tiny little stills. One of them has a capacity of 500 liters. The other has a capacity of 1,000. They produce on average 1 barrel of whiskey per day. So this is very slow, very steady progress towards something bigger and better.
Wow.
But they say themselves right on the packaging itself, the reason it's not 100% their own spirit is they just don't have enough of it to go around. They really wanted to sort of stretch it out and also sort of incorporate maybe some older things, some world malts and other maybe Japanese malts in order to sort of project forward a little bit and take a look at what it might turn into.
And that's one of the things I really, really like about the Amahagan. One of the things that really drew me to it is it's not trying to, like, I don't think any Japanese whiskey is necessarily trying to trick people, if that's some of them are. But this is very, very upfront about what it is, what kind of whiskey this is. Actually, do you mind if I read the box?
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
I think it says right on here, yeah. Nagahama Distillery is a new craft distillery in Japan. We blended our self-distilled malts with aged malt whiskeys selected from all over the world since we don't have enough aged whiskey yet. Perfecting this blending technique is our new challenge. Which I said in my original tasting notes, I think they knocked that challenge out of the park.
Yeah.
I think they did incredibly well. And having now recently tasted the number 2, it wasn't just a fluke. Non-chill filtered and non-coloured. These guys know their market. They know what they're doing. It's also bottled at slightly higher. It's 47 as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These guys are really going for that well-educated, probably more Scotch whiskey aficionado market.
Yeah.
And they are doing it incredibly well.
Yeah.
And I know they don't actually say fully what the other distilleries or even where the other distilleries are, but I have read the dirt sheets, so to say, to steal a wrestling term.
Mm-hmm.
They have that there have been rumours around that it includes not only Scottish malt but also Australian, Indian, and North American malt.
Wow.
Which I think is a really cool concept.
Yeah, truly
And
global.
Yeah, and the whole point of Japanese whiskey is to master the art of blending, which they took that challenge and ran with it. Like they really wanted to get a disparate selection of flavors from different distilleries all over the world. It's not just them and whatever cheapest whiskey they could find on the open market. And they treated it with the reverence and respect that created such a wonderful product in the end.
Yeah, really, really great stuff. And a distillery absolutely sort of in its infancy. This distillery has only been open since October of 2016. As Adam sort of alluded to earlier, the head distiller here, Master Blender Takashi Kiyohi?
Yeah, yeah.
Began at a brewery, much like the head of the Shinobu distillery that we spoke about just a moment ago. So he joined Nagahama Roman Beer in 1998, and really helped sort of get that off the ground and get sort of different styles of beer, popular in that area of Japan. 2016 began distilling there. This whiskey was released in 2018. So that's an interesting little point as well, is, the whiskey component in this is like almost barely sort of whiskey in the legal sort of sense of the word, especially when you look at a place like Scotland or somewhere like that.
Yeah, the laws and rules for whiskey are a little bit confusing in Japan, and I've always not been entirely sure what the age limit is. Judging from this, probably 2, which would put it in the same as Australia, which is fair. They're similar kind of temperate. The kind of places where Australia makes whiskey is mostly Tasmania, which is a kind of a very similar climate to the north of Japan. So that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, south of Japan, the hemispheres.
So this gentleman, Mr. Kiyohi, he did study at Strathern and also at Eden Mill, another sort of, I believe that's a brewery distillery as well.
Yeah, the only one in Scotland, or at least the first combined brewery distillery in Scotland. And Eden Mill's really cool. I think it was Eden Mill that's actually owned by one of the universities. But we had a 3-year-old Eden Mill in the SNWS last year, which absolutely blew my socks off. I think there's still one bottle left at Legacy, which I've been toying with buying a bottle. It's
Nice.
very good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, something I think you're always going to get, just to sort of speculate for a moment, from anybody who's really mastered the art of brewing prior to distilling, is they're going to have an appreciation and a respect for the qualities that yeast are going to impart on the finished product, which is something it's been debated on and off for a number of years now. But my feeling, and I think the feeling of a lot of people who are, you know, close to the industry in some ways, is that using the more sort of commercial distiller's yeast that you're finding in most mass market sort of whiskey production in this day and age is sort of cutting down on the character that you might get using more you know, varied sort of brewer's yeast, things like that, you know, they have such a massive impact on the flavor of a finished beer. They can't help but have some sort of an impact on the
yeah.
You know,
And if you can create
spirit.
a more flavorful spirit, it also means that you don't necessarily have to age it as long. And that's one of the things about that 3-year-old Eden Mill. It actually won the best lowland whiskey under 12 in the Whiskey Magazine competition of that year.
Wow.
It was a 3-year-old and it won the best under 12,
That's pretty cool.
which is mad.
Yeah, that's wild for sure. So yeah, this is edition 1. This is 100% ex-bourbon. I do have some info that they're using Heaven Hill for their ex-bourbon barrels. Cool. So that's, you know, something with a little bit of provenance to it.
Absolutely.
As I mentioned, yeah, only 1 barrel a day. The alembic stills that they're using definitely do also have sort of an impact on the finished flavor of the whiskey. They're incredibly tiny, as I mentioned, but they do have like kind of a really unique sort of wide-headed. It's just like a representation of what they're like, and apparently that sort of design is going to give you like a cleaner finished spirit, but sort of a richness and a depth at the same time.
And it makes sense. It's much the same as in cask conditioning. Like the whole mathematical idea of the smaller the barrel, the more contact of the spirit in the wood. It's the same with stills, right? There's more contact between the spirit and the copper in a smaller still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That makes good sense based on my sort of limited understanding of the science of distilling. For sure.
And these stills, if I remember correctly, were made in Portugal as well. Which is
That's right.
interesting.
Yeah. From a place called Hoga, which is a renowned Portuguese sort of still manufacturing place. So, as Adam mentioned, there is an edition 2 out there. Not, unfortunately, at the Strath at the moment, but it is around. Hopefully, it is coming back. That was done, finished in a red wine barrel, so something really unique and sort of different. And then there is an edition 3. It hasn't gotten its way out of Japan yet, as far as I'm aware, but it will be incoming at some point, and that's yet again another Mizunara Japanese oak finish on that one. So something to keep your eyes glued to. And I feel like in general, because they are, you know, they're putting their own spirit on the line, they're putting their own, you know, juice in the bottle, as it were. And I what they're doing so far, like just based on this, we haven't even really talked that much about the whiskey yet.
No.
But it's so good already at such a young age and blended with other world malts. I really, really see this distillery going places in terms of like a profile and sort of reverence, awards, all the type of stuff. And I really feel like I hate to even bring it up because whiskey is for drinking, but this is something that has some potential appreciation value. I think so too. Yeah, there's really maybe no way around it. It's numbered. It's got their juice in it. It's really
the first ever release.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's the first thing this distillery has ever done.
Yeah,
and we have a bunch of it in BC, which is rare.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Something to maybe buy 1 or 2 of and have one to drink and one to maybe tuck away for a rainy day in these uncertain times.
Yeah. So flavor wise, the thing that really hits me hard with this whiskey. This time around, I know the first time I had it, maybe quite different. I don't know if you've got my notes again.
I have.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'll trip down memory lane.
Sure.
I know we called it a munificent bounty of fruits.
Munificent.
Yeah.
Delicious.
But what I'm really getting this time, and I don't know if I really found it before, is a beautiful darkness. There's these like. You know when you snack on those chocolate-coated coffee beans?
Yeah.
It's got that kind of thing going on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, or there's something else going on there.
A lot of dark fruits, chocolate, dark chocolate, bitter chocolate, just earthy, oily sort of. There's some saltiness to it. I mean, it's very, you know, what a massive Springbank person I am. There's a real Springbanky kind of engine oily, kind of dusty, down and dirty character to this that I.
And like I said, I apparently rated this above. I did a blind knockout thing at home with some friends, my COVID bubble,
right?
And we together, actually, it wasn't just me, did a knockout, and this beat Springbank 15, which is hard to do.
Yeah, that's phenomenal whiskey from my favorite distillery. But yeah, this has a lot of the sort of hallmarks of that at a a wildly young age. It's pretty well composed and really doesn't drink like a 2-year-old whiskey with some other whiskey.
Well, that's the thing. The 2-year-old whiskey is, what did you say, 47.5% or something?
So 47.5-ish or 47% of the total blend, yeah.
So which means 53% of this could, for all we know, be minimum 20 years old. Like, we have no idea.
That's
right?
very much the case,
It could be anything.
Yeah.
But like the depth and complexity of this whiskey is shocking for the story behind it. And I went hard on this whiskey when it first arrived. I went straight in and got double the amount that apparently my boss told me I should, which is fine. I got twice as much as I normally would because I thought the story was so cool. And then when I tasted it, I thought, oh yeah, this won't last too long. Right. And I made a global pandemic.
Yes. And then that happened.
And that whole kettle of fish
fiasco. So I'll go over your Dram Association tasting notes that I once again stole from the interwebs. So you had on the nose golden raisins, stewed prunes, candied apples, bananas, rhubarb, and peaches, engulfed in sweet creaminess, which you described as cupcake batter.
Ah, nice.
I like that a lot, actually. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I see that.
Very cool. And then on the palate, you had essentially all of, or most of the aforementioned fruits from the nose, but joining the party, some apricot and orange. And then beneath the fruit, you had layers of rich dark chocolate, brioche buns, nutmeg, and malt. And you really did sort of wax poetic about the finish, which it has just like an incredibly lengthy...
It does.
Really complex, really just pleasing sort of finish to it, for sure.
It's not overly sweet at all. It's not It's not really not sweet. The fruitiness is definitely there, but it is much more of that creamy fruitiness. Mm-hmm. The rhubarb thing that I mentioned, rhubarb is it's like stewed rhubarb with a very low sugar stewed rhubarb.
Nice.
Yeah. With a thick custard.
You know what it reminds me a little bit of as well, and I always get like a Cadbury fruit and nut bar sort of a thing from this, is Bunnahabhain, just the standard Bunnahabhain 12.
That would be actually the perfect equivalent for folks who haven't tried this, who don't have an opportunity to try this or even to buy this. The most similar thing would be Bunnahabhain. I think
so,
you're quite right.
Yeah, and that just struck me like honestly just now as I was sort of.
No, it's a perfect equivalence.
Yeah, I would say so as well. So I mean, really fantastic little whiskey from an emerging distillery that I think is going to do enormous things, and I think has just limitless potential. I'm really excited to sort of follow this series year after year, and I'm excited to be a part of this company for sure. This is really fun stuff.
And I know this is before your time. You've only been with them for a couple of months now, but I do definitely want to thank TS Global through you for bringing such a unique and interesting spirit in. I know it's potentially a little bit of a gamble in a sense to bring something that is so blatant about what it actually is, and it's not trying to trick people into thinking it's a particularly over the top crazy Japanese whiskey like a lot of them are. Right. This is very much telling you exactly what it is and what it means, and for people who are actually in the know, we appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It reminds me in terms of packaging and presentation and just frankness about youth and everything else, a little bit of some of the early Kilkerrans that came out of the Glengyle distillery. Just those, follow those additions, see the infancy and the progress.
The work in progress.
And just that clean, clear sort of message. Hey, good whiskey. We're not going to sexy it up in any other way. You really just have to kind of find it for yourself. But I think people who appreciate that style of whiskey and that kind of frankness, this is a whiskey for you for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Slancher or Kampai.
Absolutely. All right.
So we're now going to set off in a very different direction, and one that I'm sure a lot of people who are at tomorrow's tasting or yesterday's tasting, depending on whether I'm referring to the time this is recorded or released. This is going to be an interesting one because we're going for a gin now. Yeah.
So complete departure from where we were in Whiskey Land just now. We are on to the Okinawan Gin. This is another edition number 1. It's a beautiful cobalt blue packaging. This one just pops off the shelf for me. Anywhere I see it, I'm just like excited, A, because it's in our portfolio, obviously, but B, because it just looks so damn cool. Like this is...
It stands out from every other gin. And in a category that is so flooded by really unique and interesting marketing right now, that is hard to do. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's just got like a very crafty sort of, it's both old-timey and very modern at the same time. It's just got like a really cool sort of, for something as basic as a glass color and a label. They put some real thought into making it sort of stand out and look kind of pretty.
Okay.
Well,
that's the gin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
this is going to be a huge shifting gears for us, and I can only imagine for the tasting that we're going to be putting on subsequent to this. It's going to be maybe a little bit jarring, but I think it'll be a fun sort of transition into our last few spirits of the day.
Of course, Japanese gin, especially locally, is a bit of a hot topic right now because our local distillery, Sheringham, one of many local gin distilleries, they won huge awards around the world last year for their Seaside Gin, their original recipe, which is using kelp, which is, I believe, a Scottish thing that I think Leon Webb actually started the first distillery to use kelp in gin. Over on the Isle of Harris gin.
Right.
But now they've moved on to their new recipe, which is picking up traction in a huge way, which is Kazuki, which is actually a Japanese style gin. And so a lot of people are like, Japanese style gin, is that a thing? So they're now discovering, yes, it is a thing, and it's magnificent.
Absolutely. So this is an example of a gin marketed as the Okinawan Gin. So Okinawa, being an island sort of at the bottom end of Japan, was an independent nation for much of its history. It's been sort of like semi-gobbled up out of the entire political sort of side of it.
I believe it's where the swordsmith lived in Kill Bill.
That's true. Yeah. Hattori Hanzo. I just watched Kill Bill again
nice.
The other night. She goes and has his bad sushi, and then he makes her an amazing sword. But yeah, it's got its own sort of distinct culture. I think maybe even at one time had its own distinct language and everything else.
Yeah, and ethnicity. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I believe it's actually, if I'm remembering this correctly, the Okinawan peoples were the ethnic ancestors to the Maori. They believe they traveled from Okinawa by boat all the way down to New Zealand.
No way.
Via a bunch of other
highways and
islands. And probably a lot of other Pacific islands were also Okinawans who were explorers.
Wow, that's very cool. So yeah, just a little bit about this gin. This is bottled at a really nice, robust 47%. This is distilled in a pot still, which is really something unique for gin production in general. Not always the case, certainly. And this is distilled from 100% rice, and not just any rice. So just to back things up towards sake once again for a little bit, essentially there is a distilled form of sake called Sochu, which you'll find all over Japan, and it's not necessarily always made from rice. It could be made, it's most commonly, I believe, actually made from sweet potatoes and things like that. But it can be made from any number of sort of fermentable starches, and it's sort of their take on a vodka, but there's often sort of like fruit infusions and things like that. And in Okinawa, there's a very particular style of sochu that's uniquely and wholly theirs, and it's called Aomori. And Aomori is basically, it's a sochu, and it's made with rice, but it's not the short grain rice that you normally find in sake. It is a long grain indica rice, like an eating rice that they use for their sake and other sort of spirit production on Okinawa. So really sort of unique in a lot of ways. It's also doing the same sort of process as the sake that we talked about earlier, so using koji to sort of break that rice down into something that's fermentable, doing the whole typical distillation process, and then an infusion of some really unique, some really interesting botanicals that are native to Okinawa that set this apart as something all its own.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Very neat. And of course, one thing that we didn't taste today that I know is also in your portfolio is they also make whiskey out of rice.
Yes, yeah, correct. So if some people watching might be familiar with our Kujira whiskeys. Right now we have the Kujira 8, the 20, and it's still around in certain places, the 30. And those are also Okinawan. They're also based on the idea of this Aomori. So it's distilled from the long grain indica rice. And then it's aged in pot stills, and then it's aged in oak barrels, very much like you'd age sort of any sort of whiskey, and they're marketing it as single grain whiskey. The interesting thing, just to get a little bit sidetracked for a minute and sort of cross promote things, the interesting thing about Kujira is that each of the Kujira branded whiskeys that you see on the market at different age statements, the majority of them are not from the same distillery. They're from little micro distilleries all over Okinawa that traditionally made this rice beverage, and now they're aging it like whiskey in different locations, and it's just sort of being bought up and bottled under the Kujira brand. And we have some more of those coming to market a little bit later this year, which is kind of exciting as well.
Yeah, and we'll certainly be bringing some into the draft.
Nice, yeah. We might do something fun with them at the Victoria Whiskey Festival this year as well.
Oh, cool.
So yeah,
nice. Looking forward to that.
Stay tuned for that for sure.
You'll catch them at the pop-up store then.
There you go. Perfect. We're doing business right here on YouTube. Fantastic. So yeah, it's really hard to talk about any gin without getting into the botanicals. And maybe I'll just quickly do that now. Some of the more unique things. There's obviously juniper. It can't really be gin without juniper. That's a key component in any gin wherever it's produced in the world. But you're also getting some really interesting things. So you're getting Roselle hibiscus. That's going to give you obviously quite floral notes, but also some plummy, sort of jammy notes. You're getting guava leaf, which is used in teas and herbal remedies on Okinawa. It's got a fresh, tropical aromatic quality, sort of similar to guava itself, like the fruit. You've got something called Balinese long pepper. Balinese long pepper can be used in recipes as a substitute for black pepper. It can be ground like black pepper, and it's got a lot of the same components in terms of like spicy bite and everything, but it also has little floral notes, little cinnamon, cardamom, nutmeg sort of notes in there with it. So it's almost like a very spicy allspice, something like that. Cool. And then probably the most standout thing that a lot of people pick out of this is something called Goya, and that's an Okinawan bitter melon. It's as the name would suggest, very bitter. It's a green melon. It's got very green, bitter sort of notes. It's used in a lot of stir fries and things. It can be made into soups, things like that. And it is a bit of an acquired taste, but I think with the other botanicals happening in this gin, it sort of marries quite lovely, in quite a lovely way, is what I mean to say. So,
nice.
Yeah. Cool. That's the story behind these botanicals.
And that, more than most gins, means that I'm still clueless. Because I don't know what most of those botanicals actually taste like, right? Yeah. So I'm trying to put all the puzzle pieces together in my head as to what on earth this gin's from a English gin background mostly. Mm-hmm. And it's like no gin I've ever had, it really is.
Yeah. I think it's a combination. It's the fact that it's rice-based, it's the pot still, it's the sort of provenance of Okinawa. I think you're getting some maritime notes because it is an island product, and it's probably made, not terribly far from the sea. And yeah, it's those botanicals really that are sort of jumping out and really just doing some interesting things with your taste buds. They do market this as a sipping gin, and I do kind of quite like it just on its own. Yeah,
I wouldn't want to put tonic with this. I think it would drown it out.
Yeah,
it's not the strongest gin. It's not the weakest either. It's a very, I would say, in the middle in terms of intensity of flavor. Mm-hmm. It's balanced, I guess, is the.
Yeah, for something bottled at 47%, it is very sippable.
Yeah.
And for a gin, that has no aging going on or anything like that, I think it's really.
Yeah, there's not really much of a harsh alcohol thing going on at all.
No, I think any little bite you get is from what I would imagine is that Balinese long pepper. You do get black peppery, sort of like sharp notes, but it's balanced with fruitiness, with creaminess, with floral notes,
And from what I understand, pretty much any spirit made from rice is going to be naturally low ABV off the still, because rice doesn't actually have much sugar in it as well. Mm-hmm. So it's probably relatively close to like still strength maybe.
Right.
Which would mean that there's probably nice burn because it's naturally this strength. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, for me, this is like this the sakes and other things in our portfolio. This is something, you know, on the newer side, and something I'm still sort of wrapping my head around as well. But it's fun to explore. It's just like a really really cool product. I think it would do. I agree. I wouldn't mix it with tonic per se. I think it would make a nice gin and soda.
Yes.
I think you could do some other cocktails where you're kind of highlighting these botanicals rather than trying to cover them up.
You treat it exactly like a Japanese Mizunara, the whiskey highball.
Mm-hmm.
Soda water, glass full of ice.
Yeah.
That'd be very refreshing.
It's just such a refreshing gin in general. And I mean, gin generally is, broadly speaking, as a category, but
it's refreshing in a very new, different way. Most of the
Yeah.
times when I find gins particularly refreshing is because they're very citrus heavy, which this is not at all.
Yeah, that's the one thing this gin is sort of lacking. I mean, there's some maybe lime zest or something kind of notes, but it's not.
I wouldn't say it's lacking it. It's not missing.
No,
it's just not there.
Yeah, but it doesn't need it. I mean,
not at all.
I think that green bitter melon.
The bitterness I'm getting to try and put this across to folks who aren't tasting it is almost the kind of bitterness that you get if you bite into a green bell pepper, like a raw bell pepper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that green vegetal sort of bitterness. I'll just slide this a little bit closer. They've got pictures of some of these botanicals.
Oh, neat.
Hopefully we can get this. Yeah, it's vaguely in focus. Maybe.
Yeah, sorry, you've got the rubbish camera.
Yeah.
I don't know if people at home know this, but the toilet paper shortages was was a big thing, but that's thankfully over. The webcam shortages is still real. Trying to buy a new webcam. Whew.
Yeah. Also, Nintendo Switch. You can't find one.
No.
I've been looking. Maybe I'll magically pass it across to you. Maybe you can get it up.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I think it's kind of interesting for people to take a closer look at the label itself is really cool.
Oh, perfect. Now you're perfectly in focus.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
And for anyone wondering why Adam looks so much sharper and clearer than I do, it's not just...
Pat's actually drunk. That's why he looks fuzzy. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Or Adam's drunk, and that's his point of view.
Yes.
One of those two things.
Nice. Actually, now that the bottle's in focus and I'm out of focus, we look about the same.
Right. Absolutely. Perfect. We'll do the rest of the tasting like this.
All right.
Wonderful.
Hi. That's... it really is a beautiful bottle.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that the glass itself wasn't blue.
I didn't either until I was talking about it and unrobing it for the first time, and I realized that there is a little bit of a gap there between the cobalt and the natural glass color. Yeah, kind of cool. So yeah, just a really fun, unique product. I don't have an enormous amount about the distillery itself, but the distillery is called Masahiro Shuzo. And it's apparently the first distillery to make sort of a gin-like spirit like this on Okinawa. And they have been around quite a long time, and their expertise is in the sort of Aomori, the rice sochu sort of equivalent that they make in Okinawa. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much for bringing a gin. This is very cool.
It's fun to switch it up sometimes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing people's reactions tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me as well. I think this will be well received for sure.
Very cool. Now, I am very much looking forward to showcasing this next one because I've had this before and it is shockingly good.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I don't know if this is something you were planning on sharing, but I'm going to force you into it because the camera's rolling and I feel like I'm an interviewer right now.
Right.
I believe this is one of the best-selling things in your portfolio right now.
Yes, we're moving an extremely good amount of these. We're selling about 120 cases of this a week right now, which is really great for our small growing company, obviously. Mm-hmm. A lot of that is on the mainland. It's really just starting to get some serious traction here on the island, but I think it's about to...
Apparently, we're behind the mainland, and I know that's weird. We're usually the trendsetters here on Vancouver Island, but we need to catch up to the mainland on this one. Mm-hmm. We've got to get going. But also, apparently, I got carried away because I didn't say the price of the gin. So the gin, if you would like to pick it up, if it's currently in stock, we don't have much, so it might sell out after the tasting. But if it is in stock, you can get your 10% off. It's normally $90.35 down to $81.32. And if it is out of stock, then I will be bringing it back in quite shortly. Or rather, Megan will. She's actually the spirits buyer. I'm just in charge of whiskey, but I'll bully her into it. If there's enough people who send me an email and complain that it was out of stock, then I might even be able to extend the 10% off for when it comes back in. I might offer some rain checks. Cool. But yes, bring out the happy little citrus fruit.
All right, so this is our happy little Yuzu Wine. One of my favorite labels for any bottle I've ever seen in my sort of 15-year career as a merchant of booze.
It's so brilliant.
It's really a lot of fun. But it's not just a gimmick. It's not just a pretty bottle. This is, as we're about to find out, a really just a gorgeous sort of great final sort of product in this lineup.
And it's something that is so completely and utterly different from anything I've ever had before.
Me too.
Much like that sparkling sake, actually. I feel like you guys are the merchants of try something different.
Yeah, exactly. And that's...
This is a huge try something different thing.
Very much so. So I will just point out right off the top, you may be able to pick it up on camera. There is like a little bit of an oily sort of a sediment here. This is perfectly normal. If you see this Yuzu wine on store shelves anywhere, or if you pick one up and you've got it at home and you see a little bit of this, all you have to do is give it a little smack on the bottom and just give it a little bit of a shake like this. And those naturally occurring oils in the Yuzu wine will mostly go away. This one's probably been sitting around a little bit longer, but you can see that cleared right up. Yeah. So, brilliant. I mean, that's nothing to be alarmed about. It hasn't gone off.
It's how you know it's real.
Very much so. Yeah. So let's...
happy smiling fruit face didn't tell you enough.
So we'll crack into this. Yeah, so this is just a really perfect sort of... I know we just started autumn, but this is a really great little summery drink. But this would be great all year round.
So I almost sold a bottle of this recently to someone who it was a very entertaining transaction. They were looking for orange wine and then were very, very disappointed to find out that orange wine isn't made with oranges. I almost got them on this as an alternative. But...
Yeah. Orange wine is indeed not made with oranges. I don't really have anything else beyond that.
But this is made with yuzu.
Yes, it is.
It's not just yuzu colored wine.
No, yeah. So yeah, interesting sort of marketing here as a wine. So this is made from... just like the gin and the sparkling sake that we had earlier, this is made from rice. This is rice with koji, of course, and yuzu fruit. And then there is a little bit of added sugar as well. And it is the best way to think about it if you're not trying this at home, or if you see this and you're like, what's happening? What is this neon yellow sort of concoction? Think of it as almost like a Japanese limoncello. Like it's got the same sort of profile as that, and it could have a lot of the same applications. It'd be great over ice cream. It would be nice with soda, just on the rocks. It's got a lot of cool cocktail sort of things.
But it doesn't actually contain any spirit. Limoncello, I believe, is actually made with
true
spirit.
Yeah,
this is actually fully a wine from what I understand. It's just fermented fruit.
Fermented rice
and fruit.
Yeah. So like a beer, wine, sake.
Yeah,
it's its own thing. Yeah, not a.
So I've yet to go in for another taste right now, but my lasting memory from the last time I had this, and if this was a whiskey, this would be the Dram Association name I would give it, is the best lemonade you've ever had.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. I'm going to hang the little neck warmer back up on it.
This is the best lemonade I've ever had. Oh,
it's so good.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is incredibly refreshing.
Yeah.
And I feel sorry for Vancouver Islanders who are behind the times and haven't discovered this one yet. Because I think the guys in the mainland managed to get this over the summer, and this is definitely a very, very summer drink. But it's never really winter here, let's face it. We don't fully have a winter. And this is the perfect drink for when you're sat at home and it's miserable outside and you close the curtains and you pretend it's summer still. You crank the heat up, you wear a shorts and t-shirt, and you drink yourself some yuzu wine.
Absolutely. Yeah. Transport yourself to a tropical destination. No one's probably going to be traveling for winter holidays this year, so let's all take ourselves to the shores of sunny Japan or wherever you like.
Yeah, this is your snowbird alternative for everyone that usually goes down to Arizona in a motorhome right now, and hopefully you're not this year. This is. Oh my god, it's ridiculous.
It's super cool. So yuzu fruit is something that's sort of gaining in popularity a little bit here. You're seeing it used in all sorts of different spirits and things like that. So what it is essentially it's a rare hybrid fruit. It used historically and cultivated historically as a herbal remedy. It did originate in China, and it's thought to be a hybrid between a mandarin orange and a rare, bitter, mostly ornamental citrus fruit called a Ichang papida. I'm sure my pronunciation is way off on that.
Sounds great.
But it's a big green gourd-looking thing that's, when you take it apart, is mostly seeds. So there's very little flesh, and the flesh that's in there is extremely bitter. And the way most people describe sort of the taste that you get from yuzu, it's a mix of lemon, lime, grapefruit, and mandarin orange. And I think that sums it up like...
Yeah, it's a citrus cocktail.
Yeah, it's all the best citrus fruits together in one just bomb of just delicious citrus.
Can I be an absolute heathen right now and do something completely mad?
Yes.
I'm going to go back. This, I believe, is the Shinobu.
You're going to put these together?
I'm going to put whiskey in the yuzu wine.
Wow.
Because in my head, that is going to be delicious.
That sounds delicious.
Right?
I'm going to let you do it first. I have a little Shinobu left as well.
Yeah. It smells like a really refreshing old-fashioned.
Nice.
That's exactly what I was going for.
All right. Well, I'm doing it too. I don't want to be left out.
Oh my god, that is incredible.
This is my...
That is the easiest gourmet cocktail I have ever made.
Wow. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, about equal measure. Yeah, perfect.
Beautiful.
I was there. That is.
Whoa. Wow.
It just suddenly struck me. It's like it's all of these citruses, and it tastes like the fresh actual juice of it. That's a cocktail base.
Yeah, it is. Definitely, it is. So that's our sort of one of our big pushes at the moment is to get this into more cocktail bar, restaurant settings and things like that. I think it has great cocktail potential. It drinks fantastically well on its own as well, but you can really play around with this in a lot of different ways. More creative people than I am sure will put all sorts of cool spins on this. It does, if you find one with the little neck attachment, which they mostly should have on them, comes with a little yuzu meringue pie recipe on the back.
That's neat.
I'll just give the YouTube viewers at home a quick sneak preview.
Becca Burley, if you're watching, I'm expecting you to make one of these.
Please do, Becca. So 1 ounce of this yuzu wine, 1 ounce of vanilla vodka, half an ounce of pineapple juice, a 1/4 ounce fresh lemon juice, and a 1/4 ounce of simple syrup. Shake with ice and serve in a sugar-rimmed martini glass.
Oh, it's not an actual pie?
Nope. It's a cocktail.
All right. Now, that also sounds great.
Becca Burley should still make it.
You should still make one, Becca.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've got some vanilla vodka. Yeah, that is exceedingly delicious on its own as a wonderful lemonade-esque treat. And I think a really good cocktail base. I'm sure you could make something so much better than this ramshackle thrown together 50-50 whiskey and yuzu wine.
Definitely.
But even this is really quite good.
It is. Yeah.
I'm really intrigued. That's your challenge now, is to try and bring something on for the Union Club, Pat.
Definitely. Yeah. That's step 2 in my master plan of world domination. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the product and the distillery. So this is bottled at 8%, which is pretty wild. Again, it doesn't taste that strong.
No.
Best served chilled, obviously, is sort of the preferential way to do it. You do want to consume it, keep it in the fridge, consume it within a week or 2 would be ideal, in all honesty. But it does have a little bit of a shelf life. It just has, some natural sort of, stabilizing qualities, and maybe from the yuzu and the sugar and everything. But it does kind of keep better than you might expect.
So it's a best before rather than a use by.
Yeah,
it'll still be good in 2 weeks. It's probably as good.
I've still honestly got a bottle in my fridge that I've had for too long, like a little over a month. And I still check it every once in a while, and it's fine, and I haven't gone blind.
So in a sense, treat it like sherry then. And
Yeah. That's
it won't last forever. Keep an eye on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but
Nice.
you can definitely stretch it out a little bit. So the distillery itself is called Asahara Shuzo. It's from the Saitama Prefecture. It was founded in 1882, so this is a pretty established, renowned brewery. It is located in a hilly region right above the Chichibu Mountains, which is kind of exciting.
That is
Just
cool.
the word Chichibu, I know,
It's a very exciting word.
gets people very excited. And the green, lush sort of area in the mountains where you find this distillery is known as, Ukumasahai, which is known for its cultivation of fruit trees, including plum, pomelo, yuzu, things like that. So it's a very lush, sort of tropical environment that lends itself to harvesting all sorts of different fruits. And currently, this brewery is run by a young member of the family that started it, I believe. And so he's quite energetic, dynamic. Obviously, they're doing some really fun things with marketing and branding and things like that. None of this, as far as I'm aware, is available here yet, but they do different umeshu, as well as pomelo, sake, and wine and things like that. So they,
Pomelo sake.
yeah, pretty interesting, pretty fun stuff.
Delightful. That's very delightful. Well, I know that sake isn't going to last much longer, so I'm going to beg you for another splash of sake.
Absolutely.
Before we close off with a closing segment.
Perfect.
Or actually, while it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here, Pat. Thank you for joining us on the Dram Association YouTube channel.
Happy to.
For folks at home who are wondering what the hell the Dram Association is, I guess now's as good a time as any to explain that it is a whiskey club based in Victoria, British Columbia. Anyone can be a part of it. We are an inclusive club for exclusive whiskey and other beverages, as seen today. It's rare that we pull other... It's actually very rare we put non-spirits out, like the Yuzu Wine and the sake, but we do dabble in alternatives. And if you want more information, you can visit dramassociation.com, and we are at the Strathcona liquor store, which you can find more information at strathliquor.com, where we have our entire inventory online ready to purchase at the click of a button. And I've got more sake. Slanchivar?
Slasher.
Prost? No, wait. Where are we? We're Japan. Kanpai.
Kanpai.
See you next time.
Cheers.
Here's to whiskey kisses, the peachy taste of sin.